love each other with genuine affection and delight and honor and build one another up. I have a deck of quote cards in my sacred space at home from Mother Teresa, and one of them says, "People who really and truly love each other are the happiest people in the world." Yes, just as I think about that and I want to get up on my rooftop or on my soapbox and start shouting about it, Paul says, "Don't think you know it all." And that is something my mother has accused me of since I was a very young child. And so I go back to my quote deck and I find the next quote, which says, "Whatever our religion, we know that if we really want to love, we must first learn to forgive." You see, love is not as easy as some of the Hollywood movies and soundtracks would have us to believe. So before we head off into a love fest this morning, I want us to take a step back and think about what real love means and what it means to be deeply nurtured and cared for and supported. We have an excellent example before us this week. Last week on Wednesday, the world celebrated the 6th annual International Day of Charity. On Wednesday, September the 5th, that was the day that Mother Teresa died, and the United Nations declared in 2012 that this would be an international holiday to recognize some of the problems in our world and to focus on alleviating poverty and distress in all of its many forms. On Wednesday afternoon, I gathered with other pastors from the Windsor Ministerial Alliance here in town, and we prayer walked around Windsor High School. The principal, Michelle Scallon, said to make sure that we stop by her office next time and cover it in prayer. But as we gathered to pray, you could hear the beeping sound of heavy machinery, because God is not quite finished with this school system or with this community yet. We are still in the throes of growth and building and development. But it wasn't just a regular prayer walk on a usual day of charity. We pastors knew that many of our students, teachers, administrators, and townspeople were and are in need of extra prayer, love, and support right now. Many of you celebrated last week's first holiday, Labor Day, right here with us on Monday morning, eating delicious homemade cinnamon rolls and watching a parade. Others joined me on a float, passing out fruit snacks and candy as we danced in the bubbles from the bubble machine, which I think was one of the most popular things about our float. But after we got home, we all learned about a terrible tragedy that took place during the parade. And we are still, as a community, mourning the loss of young Bryson Zerby's life and grieving with his parents, family, friends, and church members. The death of a child, especially a death so public and witnessed by so many, shakes an entire community. So whether you knew the family or not, I hope that you are praying for them and perhaps taking some extra time to hug your children or grandchildren or even neighbor children. I have 2 children, if you want to borrow some for hugs, a little tighter this week. Because when tragedy strikes, there is always an outpouring of love. And people respond to disaster, whether personal disasters or natural disasters, by showing up, lending a hand, holding prayer vigils, creating shrines, and even giving money. Resilient communities pull together to recover. This past May was the 10th anniversary of the nearly mile-wide tornado that ripped the town of Windsor apart. I wasn't here then, but I've heard from many of you about your stories. And when I was serving at Windsor Healthcare one morning this spring, I heard about how that morning there were children visiting from an elementary school to sing to the residents of the nursing home. And they placed the children in the inner hallway amongst the wheelchairs, child, wheelchair, and the residents and the children sang to one another and told stories to try to keep one another calm as the tornado raged right outside their doors. And no one could believe it when they opened the door to see huge trees uprooted and homes destroyed, but the nursing home was untouched. This coming week will be the 5th anniversary of the floods that devastated Colorado. In 2013, I pastored the church in Lyons, which was cut off for 3 days when our roads and bridges washed out. Later, our church helped to raise $1 million to fund flood recovery efforts, and we expanded our food pantry to feed 15% of our town. I remember 5 years ago working more than 10 hours a day at my part-time pastor job. And I was caring for Lillian, our little girl, who was only 3 months old at the time of the flood. But it's funny when I think about it, because I never felt tired during those days, weeks, and months after the flood, and I don't think that it was just adrenaline. I feel like God placed me in Lyons for a time such as that one. And I used all of my pastoral training, as well as my previous career in corporate business, to organize and fundraise and listen to and help address all types of needs from our community: physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. I was exactly where God wanted me to be. I was doing exactly what God created me to do, and although the work was heartbreaking and difficult, I felt energized and renewed, even after extremely long days. You see, there is a mysterious blessing in identifying and using our spiritual gifts. Discovering the unique skills and talents that God blessed us with for the purpose of building up the church also helps us to create a kinder and better world. When we do what we were created to do, it gives us energy, fulfillment, and joy. Last week, my husband said to me that his plan was always to do a job that he loved, because then he'd never work a day in his life. And I think that living into our spiritual gifts is a little bit like that. So a few Sundays ago, we took a test to discover our gifts, and if you don't know what yours are but would like to know, you can let me know or pick up a copy of the inventory and scoring sheet in a little box outside the church office downstairs, because we are currently preaching about and examining 4 clusters of spiritual gifts. 2 weeks ago, we considered how organizing gifts focus on the structure and the programs of the institutional church to help us become the body of Christ. And last Sunday, we examined how witnessing gifts help us to share and deepen our own Christian faith, education, and worship. Today, we are talking about nurturing gifts, those gifts which turn inward to focus on building fellowship, visitation, small groups, Sunday school, like the program we restarted this morning, and even congregational care, how you all care for one another in your times of need. The nurturing gifts include shepherding, mercy, exhortation, and hospitality, as well as helping, giving, wisdom, and faith. You see, all Christians are called to the work of nurturing. Remember that in Romans 12:11, Paul said, "Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically." Is that a word that you could use to describe yourself when you think about the ways that you serve the Lord here at church and in your community and family? Are we enthusiastic? In verse 13, Paul says, when God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. We are all called to welcome and help one another. And in fact, your top priority as a church, as we were considering our strategic visioning process, was to offer a warm, inclusive welcome to anyone who graces the doorstep of this building. But to those of you who have the spiritual gifts in this cluster, you may feel particularly affirmed and fulfilled if you use them to support others. Shepherding is the counsel and encouragement given to help others find their spiritual gifts, grow in their faith, sustain their life journeys, and overcome obstacles. Some modern spiritual gifts inventories call this gift guiding, since we have lost the depth of meaning around the word shepherding. But those with this gift are not particularly interested in goals or plans or tasks. They are more concerned with the spiritual well-being of others. Mercy or compassion is a deep concern for all who suffer, Christian and non-Christian. Those with mercy do acts of service to alleviate some physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional pain, and to demonstrate Christ's love, even if they never speak a word about it. Exhortation is the special ability to speak words of comfort, encouragement, and counsel that lift someone else. Encouragers offer patience, support, and strength, never trying to fix someone else, but walking alongside them for a short while. And finally, hospitality. Hospitality is showing God's love to strangers by offering them a warm welcome, food, or lodging. Those with this gift have a deep desire to open their homes and their churches and their lives to care for those who are not in their immediate family or group. We'll be talking more about outreaching gifts next week, the missional ways in which we try to reach new people in the world, but I love Mother Teresa's approach. In my last card, she writes, "Kindness converts more people than zeal, science, or eloquence." Kindness. So this week, I'd like to challenge us all to follow the example of Mother Teresa and to take better care of ourselves and of one another. Take that moment to speak to the person who's been on your heart. Send that text message, email, or letter. Stop by, say hello, bring that gift that you've thought of bringing. Reach out, connect, even if it feels awkward or uncomfortable. Care for one another. Truly and deeply love one another. This morning you're going to hear in a moment from Jamie about an opportunity of how we care for one another in this congregation. And Jamie, I invite you to come forward. And as she does, I invite you all to consider what ways you could spread a little more love and kindness in this church and in our community. Amen.